As Unai Emery would say, good evening, and thank you for joining me here on my YouTube channel. I am the Modern Dodo, and I have a feeling that today's video submission is going to get a little bit more attention than most of the YouTube videos that I end up producing, or most of what I repost on social media. So just to rewind a little bit, I started my Modern Dodo persona YouTube channel, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, what am I missing? Twitter, as well as my website, www.themoderndodo.com, as a way to practice for my career in marketing. It exposed me to different platforms where I could experiment and really learn how they work without doing it on a professional scale that impacted the business that employs me. So what I'm saying is I don't take myself too seriously on any of these channels. When I got started, it was what to watch, sports on TV. I knew I needed content to cover, so that's what I went to, and I was building out weekly schedules of the top sports matches to watch on TV each and every day for the week ahead. What I found out was, one, they were often soccer fixtures, which is huge for me because I'm a soccer fan, but two, there was a lot of behind the scenes work just laying out that schedule and identifying what were those big matches or fixtures each and every week. So that was taking up too much of my time. I do have a day job after all. I quickly converted over and took off all the heat and said, you know what, I'm not going to worry about video production. I'm not going to worry as much about the content. I'm just going to talk about whatever I want to talk about. I've spent some time recently talking about social media, marketing, NFTs, a little bit of cryptocurrency, things of that nature, and I'm sort of spinning my wheels just because it's not fresh and new every week. So as we enter into the new Premier League season, I think I'm going to spend more time talking about where my passion truly lies, and that is what's happening in the Premier League every single weekend, and specifically what's happening with my favorite team, Arsenal. I grew up playing for a club that was sponsored by Arsenal. I grew up playing for the Ann Arbor Arsenal. I'm also actually a big fan of Norwich City. I have some friends over there that work for the club. So it's an exciting season for me because not only do I get to watch Arsenal, but also Norwich City each and every weekend. Pretty cool stuff. Except for this past weekend. So this past weekend, I was traveling, I was vacationing. I actually didn't even have cell phone service because I was hanging out with my high school friends, some of whom I have not seen for 20 years, on a mountain out in Colorado. I made it all the way back to Tampa, Florida, which is what you see in my backyard and why I probably have a little bit of sweat in my forehead because it's warm here. And believe it or not, I ignored all notifications, social media. I was able to settle back in for a delightful Sunday of TV football viewing, and I started off with Arsenal versus Brentford. We know how that went. Not good for the Gunners. I then tuned into Norwich City versus Liverpool. I think Norwich City played all right. They had some spurts where they controlled a little bit of play. Liverpool's a good squad, so I think that's a fair result for Norwich City. But I am pretty disappointed in what transpired on the pitch for Arsenal. So I wanted to take a deeper dive into that today. And what I normally have done on this channel is I usually default to a pretty simple recipe of top 3 reasons why XYZ is cool. And today, I'm going to talk about top 3 reasons why I believe Arsenal is struggling so much. So, before you get all caught up and, oh no, here comes an American talking football, he's calling it soccer half the time, what are we doing here? I'd argue that you should give me a chance. I did grow up playing soccer through a proper age. I think about 18, 19, I was going to go and walk on at Michigan State to play there. So I do have some experience playing, and I'd argue that most people that would watch this and tune in and think negatively, one, I could match up pretty well with you on the pitch, and even if I couldn't, I'd go Sergio Ramos on your ankles and slow you down just a half step. So all joking aside, let's jump into the things that are troubling me about Arsenal's current setup and the results that they're getting. So first and foremost, I think it's painfully obvious our roster is bloated. We have no European football. So usually you're carrying a larger roster so that you can rotate in and out to get those midweek fixtures properly covered and rest your best players. Oftentimes, especially when you're like Arsenal in the Europa League, you're resting your best players for the Premier League fixtures on the weekends. But this year, we don't have any of that to worry about. So, despite the lack of sales, I'm trying to think. We've sold Joe Willock. Is that it? Is that all the sales that are out there? Despite the fact that our fixtures has been arguably cut in down by 33%, it doesn't make any sense that we haven't trimmed this roster. And why is this so important? Why am I wasting breath talking about it? Why not just let these players sit on the sidelines? I just cannot believe that a player such as Willian, for example, is happy when he's not even making the lineup card, when he's sitting at home watching from the couch. And despite the fact that that's what he's doing on game day, he's probably in and around the club and practicing with the club. We saw the same thing, and actually now that he's offboarded himself from the squad, Socrates spoke about how difficult it was to be dropped and how he wasn't used to it, and it was a difficult time for him to handle that. You cannot tell me that players who are not getting playing time, such as Willian, who have these rightfully deserved massive professional footballer egos, are showing up at practice and are showing up at training and are doing so with a good attitude. At the end of the day, it's a culture problem, and it has to be resolved. So I don't care if you need to sell Ainsley Maitland-Niles for 50 cents on the dollar, for half of what he's worth. He has to go. He doesn't want to play right back. Arteta's never going to let him play center mid. He's got to go. You got to sell him. You got to get him out of there, and that will allow for more room within the locker room for those positive personalities to shine, right? If you can get Willian out of there, that's more opportunity for Saka's exuberance for the game to shine through. So listen, this isn't a knock on Willian. It's not a knock on guys that have experienced that. But if they're not going to play, they're going to be expected to be a little bit down in the dumps. And you cannot have that around a team when culture is the straw that stirs the drink and leads to success on the pitch. So please, 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 there's 2 weeks left in the transfer window. You have to get it done. You have to sell 4 or 5 players at a cut rate to get them out of there, because the money that you sacrifice in terms of your sales and what you would expect from these players, I get it. The finances are off right now due to COVID and everything. You got to get them out the door so that the team's culture can rise up. That'll more than make up for the losses that you incur on the financial sheet. So, bloated roster size is the first of topics that I want to address and bring up. Most importantly, I would argue that life is too short to be unhappy. First and foremost, it's too short for Arteta to constantly have to have those tough conversations. And it's too short for guys like Willian. And I know I'm sort of picking on him, but it's just that he didn't dress and he's a talented footballer. Get him to a club where he can get back out on the pitch and he can start enjoying football again. We don't need another Mesut Ozil situation. It's not going to get us anywhere, and life's too short. You got to move on. I don't want to name names, and I think I can safely do this. I'll tell you, it's not my primary employer, but I'm involved in a few other organizations. And we had one organization where we had the head of our organization who was unhappy, rightfully so. Maybe, who's to say? He was unhappy with how he was being treated and the fact that he was not gaining the pay that he thought he wanted. And quite frankly, we, as the board for this organization, weren't totally in love with his performance. So we tried to make it work for, 6 months or so, and eventually parted ways. And I hope and pray that he's much happier in his new role. I know for a fact that we're much happier having somebody that's embracing and is happy in the role after they've backfilled that position. So I've seen it a million times with staffing. This is a staffing issue, despite the fact that they're footballers. It's a staffing issue. Life is too short. Cut them free, move them on, allow them to get back out there scoring goals, and they'll be happy in their new destination. We'll be much happier than we move on. So, I'm out of breath. I'm only on topic number 1. Let's move on to topic number 2. Topic number 2 is lineup building, and it's sort of going to, for me, parlay into topic number 3 a little bit. But Arteta's got to start getting this right. And for me, we're just getting too cute with it. We're trying to put together a puzzle that puts all of our best players on the field. But I would argue that what's actually happening is that we are limiting the impact of our best players by trying to compile this puzzle. So the first example that I would give is Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. Some may argue that he's lost a step. For me, I don't know. I think probably Saka's our best player. Well, here, I'll go with it this way. If Saka's our best player, for me, his best position is that left forward. So let's stop slotting him in at left wing back. Let's stop putting him out on the right-hand side. If Saka is our best player, let's go to him and say, what's your best position, or work together to establish his best position. For me, it is that left forward position. Arsenal sort of plays that as a mid because they play one up top. But it's out on that left side, that attacking left side position, combining with Tierney. Actually, Tierney's probably our best player. But either way, Saka starts there and you plug it there, right? The spot I was going to start was Aubameyang. He's currently playing on the left. I would actually argue that Aubameyang's best position, and I bet he would too, is up top in that number 9 role. So put him up top in the 9 role, put Saka out on the left. What does that mean? That means that a very talented Lacazette is left without a role in this club. It means he either comes off the bench or he gets sold, and we strengthen our, let's say, right back position, because I'm going to talk about that right back position later. So if Lacazette needs to get sold, he gets sold. If we need to take 75%, 60% of what he's worth, sell him on, move him on, bring in a proper right back, bring in some depth for the center of your defense, bring in a holding midfielder. Any of those can be addressed with the funds from selling Lacazette on, even if it is only a cut rate deal. And then you get people in their proper position. We've seen it for the past couple of years, that we keep shifting people around as a puzzle. Another great example is Xhaka gets pulled out of the midfield to play left back when Tierney's hurt. We finally addressed it with Tavares, but we let it go on for way too long. What happens when you shift Xhaka back to that left back position is that now not only is he not 100% of Granit Xhaka at left back, but now you're bringing in a lesser defensive midfielder, and you're ultimately weakening 2 positions, trying not to weaken 1. So enough is enough, Arteta. Please put the best players in the best positions, and let's see what happens. Let's build from there. Resting players like Saka for the first 2/3 of the game against Brentford is a luxury that we don't have. Lineup rotation and fitness management is a privilege that comes with winning. So when we start winning games again, then we can worry about conserving energy. We've got to start by putting the best players in the best position to succeed. Now, speaking of the best position to succeed, this is where topic 2 and topic 3 blends a little bit. But the final thing that I want to point out that I think is the biggest problem with Arsenal right now is, at the end of the day, it always starts at the top. It all starts at the top. It starts there and it trickles down. So, ultimately, the problem is, and I think many people watching this, if you're an Arsenal fan, you're going to agree with me, the problem's Kroenke. The lackluster results on the pitch are the responsibility of Kroenke and how he's managing things off the pitch. Now, you could actually place a pretty good argument. I don't know his personal finances, and I know clubs like Man City and Chelsea are just splashing cash. I don't know Kroenke's personal finances, but he has paid up some cash. He paid $70 million for Pepe, just laid out $50 million for Ben White. Like, some of the funds have been there, and he's been spending. So I don't necessarily fault him there, but I do fault him with how he has structured the organization. And it's a really simple formula. One, put together the finances. Two, hire an excellent CEO and hold that CEO accountable. So I don't know what resources Vinay has to run Arsenal and how the structure is being laid out, but I would guess it's either one of two things. One, Vinay is not the best person that we could hire to do that job, or two, he doesn't have the resources to be successful. If either of those are the issue, which I would bet it's one of the two or a combination of both of those are the responsibility of Kroenke to take care of. So you get Kroenke taking care of his business, it trickles down to Vinay, and then it trickles down to guys like Adu and Arteta. A lot of people are saying Arteta should be relieved of his duties already. Adu doesn't know how to manage the transfer market. I can almost guarantee you that if Arteta was to move on to an organization that had a better structure above him, such as, let's point to Leicester City, who's been performing at a high level. Let's point to even Wolves and maybe perhaps Leeds. He would perform as a much different manager. You see it all the time in sports. A player has a lackluster performance for a number of years. They move on to a club who's at the top of the standings, and all of a sudden the environment around them raises their performance to a different level. So I don't think it's Arteta's fault. I think Arteta just needs to be put in a position to be successful. I can't remember exactly when it occurred, but fairly quickly in his young coaching career, Arteta was promoted from coach to manager. Right? He was promoted from coach to manager. Quite frankly, he didn't win anything. Right? It's not like we're finishing at the top of the Premier League table. His performance has been subpar. Now, I'm not saying Arteta out. I'm just saying don't promote the guy. Let him focus in on the things that he needs to focus in on. And that's running proper practices and trainings and tactics and putting the right guys on the pitch and building the right lineup card. So one of the examples that's an indicator for me that he's struggling with even the most basic stuff, that he's overwhelmed in his current job, is the way things played out last, I guess it would have been Friday. Like I said, I watched it on Sunday. If you look at what ended up happening, we ended up starting Chambers at right back. I'm fine with that decision. I like Caleb Chambers. He didn't have a great game, but he started there. And our bench was filled up with Ainsley Maitland-Niles, Hector Bellerin, and Cedric Suarez. So we had 3 right backs on the bench. To me, that just doesn't make any sense. It's a broken system. You can make an argument that, well, maybe Maitland-Niles was a backup holding midfielder. Fine, whatever. Still, you've got 2 right backs on the bench. But where the real craziness comes in is then when a substitution finally came in, it was Tavares, a natural left back. Listen, I'm not saying that Tavares was an improper substitution at that point in time, but what I am saying is that if Tavares is going to go in and slot in as your backup right back anyway, you don't need to have Bellerin and you don't need to have Suarez in the roster card. Quite frankly, both of them needed to either be on the bench so that we could balance our lineup with proper substitutions to give us more options in the final 30 minutes of that fixture, or they just need to be sold and get out there. Back to my number one point about proper culture. So the fact that Arteta didn't see that he would substitute Tavares in at right back, and therefore he was overloaded with right backs on his bench. The fact that he didn't see that, quite frankly, it doesn't mean that I'm coming at him with the pitchforks. It means that he's overwhelmed and he's not set up for success because he's not focusing on the basics and the foundation. So there you have it. That's my 2 cents. That's an Arsenal analysis from an American. I covered it. I talked about bloated roster size that needs to be trimmed quick, ASAP. There's only not even 2 weeks left in the transfer window. Guys got to go. It's good for culture. It's best for culture. I talked about lineup building. Stop getting cute. Stop putting together the puzzle. Put the best players in their best position and then fill out the lineup around them. And finally, it starts at the top. Kroenke has to set up his team for success, and it all trickles down from there. So, if what I said resonates with you, great. Please share this. I'd love for some people to pick this up, give me some feedback, start a little bit of conversation. I know that the Gunner Army is out there and it's strong, so we can get some comments and we can get some sharing going and some followers going with this. I'd personally be honored if some of that happened. I also know that there's probably going to be some backlash. What does an American know about football? If that's the case, fine. Topics 1 and 2, put me out to pasture. Ignore me on that. Be critical. But if you want to talk about topic number 3, it all starts at the top. I would argue that I know a whole lot more than you think that I know. I spent 17 years of my career working for the Tampa Bay Lightning Hockey Club, and what I saw firsthand was reinforcement of my long-held belief that it always does start at the top. So for me, as soon as we got proper ownership in and Jeff Vinnick hired the very best CEO and president to run the Lightning organization, things took off. And a number of years ago, I said it was only a matter of time until the Lightning start winning Stanley Cups. Well, several years later, I have a handful of hardware to prove that maybe I do know what I'm talking about, and the Lightning are now back-to-back Stanley Cup champions. All because the people off the ice have taken care of business, built an amazing culture for the players on the ice to be the very best version of themselves. So, we've got Chelsea coming up this weekend. We've got Man City right behind that. Hopefully, I'm not pulling out my hair when I tune in for my next YouTube video. I'll probably be discussing more Arsenal soccer. I am an American, so I'll probably be discussing Christian Pulisic. So until then, everybody who's watching, enjoy your upcoming footballing weekend. Come on, you Gunners, and On the Ball City. We'll see you in a week. Take care.